The morning sun barely broke through the gray clouds as the young girl stepped out of the small, crumbling house she shared with her little brother. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and the faint aroma of cooking fires from other homes nearby. She clutched her thin shawl around her shoulders, but it did little to shield her from the chilly wind that cut across the village streets. Every step she took was careful, almost hesitant, as she made her way toward the bakery. Her stomach twisted in knots, not just from hunger, but from worry. Her little brother had not eaten since last night, and the sight of him lying on their worn-out mat, weak and pale, had left her heart aching. She had no money. None at all. Her mother had passed away months ago, and her father had left when she was too young to remember. She and her brother had been on their own, surviving day by day, finding whatever scraps of food they could. Today, though, the situation had become unbearable. She needed bread, even if it meant risking trouble. She tried to reason with herself, telling herself that she would only take what her brother needed, that no one would be truly hurt by it. Still, the thought of getting caught made her hands tremble as she approached the bakery. She noticed the familiar smell of fresh bread wafting through the air. Warm golden loaves lined the shelves behind the glass, and the baker, a stout man with a sour expression, was busy arranging them. She lingered outside, pretending to look at the cracked pavement, hoping no one would notice her watching. She counted the coins she didn't have in her mind and felt a pang of despair. She wanted to run away, to find some other way. But her brother's face flashed in her mind again, his lips chapped and cheeks sunken. That image pushed her forward. Inside the bakery, the warmth hit her instantly, a stark contrast to the cold outside. She tried to act normal, moving slowly toward the bread, her eyes darting around. The baker was busy wiping the counter, and she thought perhaps he would not notice her. Her heart raced, every beat echoing in her ears. She reached for a small loaf, just enough to fill her brother's stomach, and hid it under her shawl. The bread felt heavy against her thin body, almost like the weight of her guilt and fear pressing down on her. She tried to move toward the door, but her foot caught on a loose tile, sending her stumbling slightly. The baker looked up and froze. His eyes narrowed as he saw the shawl bulging suspiciously. Without a word, he stepped toward her, his face darkening with anger. She froze, unable to move, her mind spinning with fear. She had never felt such terror before. He grabbed her arm roughly, and the bread fell to the floor with a soft thud. She tried to explain, her voice shaking, but he didn't listen. His hand struck her cheek, a sharp sting that made her head spin. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as he pushed her toward the door. She stumbled outside, clutching her arm, her heart pounding. Her brother, who had been playing near the house, ran to her side the moment he saw the red mark on her face. He looked up at her with wide, worried eyes, and she knelt down, holding him close. She whispered that she was okay, even though every part of her body ached, and her pride felt shattered. The bread lay forgotten on the ground, trampled slightly by the feet of passers-by. She felt the sharp sting of failure more than the pain from the baker's hand. She had wanted to help her brother, to fill his empty stomach, and now she had nothing to show for it. They walked home slowly, the young girl supporting her brother's small hand in hers. Each step was heavy, weighed down by hunger, pain, and shame. As they entered their tiny home, the chill of the morning seemed to follow them inside. She laid her brother down on the mat and tried to comfort him, even though she felt herself breaking inside. She searched the house, hoping for some forgotten scrap of food, but there was nothing. The cupboard was bare, and the pot on the stove was empty. She wrapped her arms around her brother, trying to shield him from the cold and the harsh reality of their life. Hours passed, and the village outside bustled with activity. Children played in the streets. Women carried baskets of vegetables and firewood, and the sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air. But inside their small home, there was only silence, punctuated by the occasional sob or sigh. The young girl stared out of the small, cracked window, watching life go on without them. She wondered if things would ever change, if someone would ever see her struggle and offer help. She felt invisible, trapped in a world that seemed indifferent to her pain. As evening approached, hunger gnawed at her belly, but she refused to eat anything that might leave her brother without. She gathered what little firewood they had and managed to cook a thin broth, barely enough to fill their stomachs. Her brother ate slowly, and she watched him, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. He was safe for now, but she knew tomorrow would bring the same struggle. She sat beside him, holding his hand, silently vowing that she would find a way to protect him, no matter what it took. Night fell, and the village quieted down. The young girl lay beside her brother on the thin mat, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, worry, and faint hope. She thought about the bakery, the bread, and the punishment, and she felt a deep sense of injustice. How could the world be so cruel to someone trying to care for their family? She pressed her face into her brother's hair, trying to swallow back tears, wishing for a miracle, for someone to notice them, for someone to care in the darkness. She imagined a life where they would never go hungry again, where her brother would grow up healthy and happy, where she could smile without fear. She didn't know if that life existed, but the thought kept her awake, her heart clinging to a fragile thread of hope. She didn't speak, but she promised herself that she would not give up. No matter how hard the world pushed against her, she would protect her brother. She would find a way to survive. And in that silent night, amidst the cold and the hunger, the young girl made a choice. She would continue to fight, to endure, to hope. Because even in a world that seemed cruel and unforgiving, she could not let go of the love she had for her brother. That love, small and fragile as it seemed, was her strength, her courage, and the one thing that kept her moving forward when everything else felt lost. The next morning came with the same gray sky and biting cold. The young girl woke up to the soft whimpers of her little brother. His face was pale, and his small body trembled from hunger. She hugged him tightly, trying to warm him with her own thin body, but she knew it was only a temporary comfort. She had nothing to give him, not even a piece of bread. The memory of yesterday's humiliation at the bakery lingered in her mind like a shadow. Every time she thought about the baker's angry eyes and the sting of his hand, her heart tightened. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, yet she refused to let her brother see her fear. She decided to leave the house early, hoping to find someone who might offer a little help. The village was stirring to life. People were moving about with a sense of purpose she had never felt. She approached a small market, hoping to find something cheap, maybe even a piece of leftover food that no one wanted. She wandered from stall to stall, but the vendors shooed her away, their eyes cold and indifferent. Some muttered words she couldn't hear, but the sharpness in their tones cut her deeply. It was as if her very presence was an inconvenience to them. By midday, her stomach growled loudly, a painful reminder of her own hunger. She found a quiet corner near a fountain and sat down, trying to gather her strength. Her brother had insisted on following her, his small hand clutching hers, and she felt responsible for keeping him safe. She tried to smile, but it came out as a forced, hollow expression. Around them, children played and laughed, eating treats from their parents, or money they didn't need to count. The contrast was unbearable, and tears threatened to spill over. She pressed her lips together and turned her face toward the sky, wishing desperately for something, anything. To change it was then that she noticed whispers from a few villagers who had gathered nearby, pointing at her and murmuring. Their voices carried words she could barely make out. But the meaning was clear. She had been caught stealing, and the story had spread through the town. Fear gripped her again, the same fear that had struck her in the bakery. People would judge her, punish her, perhaps even take her brother away. She held him closer, hoping he wouldn't understand the weight of their situation. Her mind raced with ways to protect him, ways to survive. She thought of running away, of leaving the village entirely, but where could they go? There was no safe place for two children without anyone to care for them. As the day wore on, she returned home, weary and empty-handed. Her brother's stomach ached, and his eyes were heavy with sleep, but he refused to rest until he saw her try. She felt a deep sorrow for him, for the unfairness of life that had placed them in this position. She found herself pacing the small room, thinking of every possible way to find food, to make their lives just a little better. But no solution came, and each passing hour made her feel smaller, more helpless. She wondered if there were people who could see their plight, people who might offer a helping hand, but the world seemed deaf to their suffering. In the evening, the baker's cruelty from the day before returned to her mind. The image of his hand raised against her, his face twisted with anger, made her stomach churn. But worse than the pain was the shame. She had only wanted to feed her brother, to give him a small comfort in a life filled with hardship. And instead she had been beaten and humiliated. She felt trapped in a cycle of suffering, unable to protect herself or her brother. The walls of their small home felt suffocating, closing in on her as she tried to soothe him. She whispered promises she didn't know she could keep, telling him that things would get better, that they would be okay. Yet in her heart, she felt the harsh truth. Life had not been kind, and there was no guarantee it ever would be. That night, sleep came reluctantly. She lay beside her brother, holding him close, feeling his shallow breaths against her chest. She listened to the sounds of the village outside, the distant laughter, the clanging of pots, the occasional shout, and she felt both isolated and desperate. She thought of the bakery, of the villagers who had looked away, and of the life they led, so unfair and harsh. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silently marking her grief. She whispered to herself that she would find a way, that she would survive, that she would protect her brother no matter what. It was a small comfort, but it was all she had. Days passed in the same way, each one blending into the next, with hunger, fear, and uncertainty. She tried to find work, but she was too young, too small, and no one would offer her employment. She begged for scraps, for leftovers, but most people ignored her or turned her away. The baker's eyes haunted her, and she avoided the market whenever she could, though it meant going without. Her brother grew weaker, and each cough he had sent a spike of panic through her chest. She carried him to the market, hoping for charity, but most people turned their faces, pretending not to see them. She felt invisible, forgotten, trapped in a world that had no space for her suffering. One afternoon, she noticed a commotion near the center of the village. A large, well-dressed man had arrived, drawing the attention of everyone around. His presence was commanding, and people whispered about his wealth and influence. The young girl stayed in the shadows, watching from a distance, unsure if she should approach or hide. There was something different about him, something that made her feel a flicker of hope, but she quickly pushed it aside. Hope, she had learned, often led to disappointment. She clutched her brother's hand tightly, wondering if anyone like him could ever truly care about someone like them. As the man walked through the village, he noticed her sitting quietly with her brother. He paused, his gaze lingering on their small figures, and for the first time she felt a glimmer of recognition. She turned away quickly, embarrassed, afraid that someone might see them and scold her again. But the man approached cautiously, kneeling down to her level. His voice was calm and gentle, asking if they were okay. The young girl hesitated, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her with such kindness, and the suspicion in her mind made her wary. She wanted to run, to hide, but something about the man's eyes made her pause. She shook her head, muttering that they were fine, even though her stomach ached and her brother's cheeks were sunken. The man didn't push, didn't judge. He simply offered a small smile and reached into his pocket, producing a few coins. He held them out, not in a commanding way, but as a gesture of help. The young girl stared at them, tears welling up in her eyes. She wanted to refuse, to protect her pride. But the hunger in her brother's eyes made her hands shake as she accepted the coins. It was the first sign of hope she had felt in days, a small light in the darkness that surrounded her life. The man watched them for a moment longer, then stood and continued through the village. She held her brother close, counting the coins over and over, trying to make sense of the unexpected kindness. She knew it was not much, but it was enough for now. Enough to buy bread, enough to fill her brother's stomach, enough to remind her that the world was not entirely cruel. She whispered a quiet thank you into the wind, hoping somehow that he could hear her. That night, she fed her brother the bread she had bought. She felt a small warmth in her heart. It was not just the food, but the understanding that someone had seen their struggle and offered help without judgment. She clung to that feeling, letting it fill her with a cautious hope. She still knew that life would be hard, that challenges would come. But for the first time in a long while, she felt that perhaps she was not completely alone. The young girl held her brother close, whispering promises of better days, and drifted into a restless but peaceful sleep. Ready to face whatever the world would bring tomorrow, the sun had barely risen, casting a pale light over the village streets. The young girl was already awake, her small hands busy cleaning the few dishes they had, trying to stretch the bread they had received from the kind stranger the day before. Her brother was still asleep, curled up on the mat, and she watched him with a mix of tenderness and worry. Each breath he took reminded her of her responsibility, and she felt the weight of the world pressing on her tiny shoulders. Life had not been easy for them, and she knew that it would not get easier on its own. She decided to leave the house early, hoping to gather some food from the market, or perhaps find a job, however small, to help them survive. The streets were beginning to fill with people, sounds of commerce and chatter creating a lively background that only made her feel more invisible. She walked with her head down, careful not to draw attention, yet her eyes constantly scanned for any opportunity. Every corner seemed to hold a possibility, and every glance from a villager seemed to remind her of yesterday's humiliation. She tried to push those memories aside, but they clung to her like shadows. As she reached the market, she noticed the same well-dressed man from the previous day. He was speaking with some of the villagers, and they seemed to hang on his every word. There was something commanding about him, yet not intimidating, a presence that drew attention without demanding it. The young girl watched from a distance, her curiosity mixed with caution. She had learned to be wary of strangers, but there was something different about him. Something that made her heart flutter with a strange mixture of hope and fear. She noticed that he glanced around, his eyes eventually landing on her and her brother. This time, instead of moving away, he approached slowly, his steps measured and careful. The young girl instinctively moved closer to her brother, shielding him with her small body. She felt a wave of apprehension, unsure if she should trust him. Yet, there was a gentleness in his expression, a softness that seemed almost out of place in the harshness of the village. He knelt down to their level, his voice calm and kind. He asked if they had eaten, if they were all right. The young girl hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She was not used to such attention, such genuine concern. Most adults either ignored her or scolded her, but this man's voice carried neither judgment nor impatience. She shook her head slightly, muttering that they were fine, though the ache in her stomach told a different story. Her brother clung to her hand, looking up at the man with curious eyes. Sensing the kindness she had not felt in a long time, the man smiled gently and reached into his pocket, producing a small pouch of coins. He held them out without expectation, without command, just offering. The young girl stared at them, a mix of gratitude and disbelief washing over her. She wanted to refuse, to maintain the dignity that life had stripped from her. But her brother's hunger was a silent plea she could not ignore. With trembling hands, she accepted the coins, feeling a spark of hope flicker within her. Over the next few days, the man became a quiet presence in their lives. He did not intrude or demand attention. He simply observed and offered help in subtle ways. Sometimes it was food, sometimes small items of clothing, always delivered with care and discretion. The young girl began to notice a change, not just in her brother, who was slowly regaining strength, but in herself. She started to believe cautiously that perhaps the world was not entirely cruel, that there were people who could see suffering and respond with compassion. The man learned about their daily struggles, about the responsibilities the young girl carried on her small shoulders. He saw her determination, her courage, and the fierce love she had for her brother. He did not offer pity, which made his kindness feel real and genuine. Instead, he offered guidance and support, helping her find small ways to survive and improve their lives. He taught her to be resourceful, to look for opportunities even in difficult circumstances, and to trust that not everyone would turn away. One afternoon, as they sat quietly near the fountain, the man handed her a small notebook and a pencil. He suggested she write down her thoughts, her worries, and her ideas. At first, she was confused, unsure of the purpose. But he explained that writing could be a way to organize her mind, to find solutions, and to dream. She took the notebook hesitantly, but as she began to write, she felt a strange sense of empowerment. The words on the page became a private sanctuary, a place where she could express herself freely, away from the judgment and cruelty of the world. Her brother watched her with curiosity, and she shared small stories with him, teaching him letters and numbers in the simplest ways. The man encouraged her efforts, praising her patience and creativity. These moments, small as they were, brought warmth to their lives, a sense of normalcy they had not experienced before. The young girl began to understand that kindness, when genuine, could change lives. Even in the smallest ways, days turned into weeks, and the presence of the man became a silent support, a steady anchor in their turbulent lives. He never forced them into gratitude, never demanded acknowledgement, but his actions spoke volumes. The young girl began to see a future that was not entirely bleak, a future where she could care for her brother and perhaps even thrive. She held on to that vision tightly, using it to fuel her determination. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across their home, the young girl sat with her brother, reflecting on the changes that had begun to unfold. The fear and despair that had once dominated their lives were still there. They were tempered by moments of hope and the knowledge that they were not entirely alone. She thought about the man, about the quiet compassion he had shown, and she realized that his presence was more than just material support. It was a lifeline, a reminder that even in a harsh world, there were those who cared. As she tucked her brother into bed, she whispered promises of protection and hope, feeling the warmth of possibility for the first time in a long while. She did not yet know what the future would hold, but she felt a strength within herself that she had not recognized before. It was a strength born of love, perseverance, and the gentle guidance of someone who had seen her struggle and chosen to help. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft sounds of the night, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, their lives could change for the better. The days passed slowly, but they brought with them small changes that the young girl began to notice. Each morning she woke to the sound of her brother stirring beside her, his weak coughs now fewer and softer. She smiled at him, a small light of hope warming her heart. Their lives were still difficult, but the presence of the kind man, the billionaire who had entered their world so unexpectedly, was like a quiet thread of safety woven through the harsh fabric of their days. One morning, he came to their home with a bundle of supplies. There was a thick blanket for her brother, a warm jacket for herself, and a basket filled with fresh bread, rice, and vegetables. She stared at him, unsure how to react. People had given her scraps before, but this was different. There was no judgment, no expectation of repayment, only a simple, generous gesture. She thanked him, her voice shaking, and he simply nodded, a small smile on his face. "Take care of each other," he said quietly, and left, leaving behind a feeling she could not fully describe. With the new supplies, the young girl felt a sense of relief, though she knew it was temporary. She cooked the vegetables over their small fire, making a simple meal that filled their stomachs and eased the constant ache of hunger. Her brother ate slowly, savoring each bite, and she watched him with a mixture of love and pride. These moments were precious, fleeting glimpses of a life that could be kinder than they had known. The man continued to visit occasionally, always discreet, never imposing. Sometimes he brought books, simple educational materials that allowed the girl to teach her brother letters and numbers. He encouraged her to read, to write, and to dream. At first, she was hesitant. Learning had never been easy when survival had always come first. But the way he spoke to her, with patience and genuine interest, made her feel that she could succeed, that she could be more than just a girl trapped in poverty. One afternoon, as she and her brother sat under a tree, he arrived with a small notebook and pencils. He explained that writing could help her organize her thoughts and express her feelings. She looked at him skeptically, unsure how words on paper could make a difference. He encouraged her gently, saying that even the smallest ideas, the quietest dreams, could grow into something real if nurtured. Hesitantly, she began to write, her hand shaky at first, then more confident as she poured her thoughts onto the page. She wrote about her brother, about the hunger, about her fears and her hopes. It was a private world, a place where she could be honest without fear. The man watched her, never interrupting, simply offering encouragement. He asked questions about her writing, about what she imagined for the future. She began to see that someone believed in her, believed that she could make something of her life despite the obstacles. The trust he placed in her inspired a determination she had never known. She began to dream of a life beyond mere survival, of a life where she and her brother could be safe, happy, and free from the constant fear that had defined their existence. As the weeks went by, the young girl became more confident in her abilities. She learned to cook better meals, to care for her brother with increasing skill, and to find small ways to earn money by helping neighbors with chores. She still faced many challenges, but she began to see that every small step forward was a victory. The man's quiet guidance, his unobtrusive support, allowed her to grow without feeling dependent, without feeling pitied. It was a delicate balance, but it gave her hope and strength. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he brought a small gift for her brother, a wooden toy, simple but carefully crafted. Her brother's eyes lit up, and he clutched it to his chest with joy. The girl felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the small but profound kindness. It was a reminder that even in a harsh world, moments of beauty and generosity could exist. She hugged her brother tightly, whispering that they were lucky to have met someone who cared so much, even if they did not yet fully understand why. The man continued to check in on them, bringing supplies, books, and encouragement. He taught the girls small lessons in patience, resilience, and resourcefulness. He did not interfere with her life, but he provided guidance that allowed her to make her own choices, to take responsibility for herself and her brother. She began to feel a sense of agency, a feeling that her actions could have an impact, that she was not entirely at the mercy of the cruel world around her. One rainy afternoon, the girl struggled to keep her brother dry under their small shelter. The wind howled, and the rain seeped through the cracks in the walls. She felt despair rising, a familiar weight pressing down on her chest. But then the man appeared, carrying a sturdy umbrella and a bundle of warm clothing. He helped them inside, laughing softly at the situation, and she felt a warmth that went beyond the physical comfort he provided. It was the reassurance that someone cared. They were not alone in the struggle over time. The young girl began to see changes not just in her surroundings, but in herself. She became more confident, more resilient, and more determined to protect her brother. She learned that even small acts of kindness could make a profound difference, and she carried that lesson with her in everything she did. The man's presence had introduced a sense of stability into their chaotic lives, steady hand guiding them without taking control. It was a delicate, quiet form of compassion that spoke louder than words. One day, as they sat outside, he handed her a small stack of notebooks and said, "These are for you. Fill them with your stories, your dreams, your plans. Never stop writing. Never stop imagining what you can be." She held the notebooks close, feeling a sense of responsibility and pride. For the first time, she truly believed that she could shape her own future, that her life could be more than a struggle for survival. She looked at her brother, who was playing nearby with his small toy, and felt a surge of hope. They had been given a chance, and she would not waste it. As night fell, she lay beside her brother, thinking about the days that had passed. The fear, the hunger, and the struggles were still there, but they were tempered by moments of kindness and hope. She realized that the world was not entirely cruel, that even in the darkest times, there were people who could see suffering and respond with compassion. She held her brother close, whispering promises of protection and love, and allowed herself to believe that, with effort and courage, they could build a life that was brighter than the one they had known. And in that quiet, reflective night, she felt a strength and determination that would carry her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The morning sun shone brighter than it had in weeks, filtering through the cracks in their small home. The young girl woke with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. Her brother was already awake, rubbing his eyes and yawning, and she felt a surge of protectiveness wash over her. Today felt different. There was a promise in the air, a hint of possibility that life might finally bend in their favor. She hugged him tightly, whispering encouragements, and prepared a simple breakfast from the supplies the kind man had provided after breakfast. She decided to step out into the village, hoping to find work that could help them more steadily. Her confidence had grown in recent weeks, thanks to the quiet guidance and subtle support of the man who had entered their lives. She approached the market, where she had once been shunned and ignored, and noticed familiar faces who had begun to recognize her determination. They nodded in passing, some even offering small tasks or scraps of work. It was not much, but it was enough to make her heart swell with pride and hope. As she carried out her chores, she reflected on how much had changed. The fear that had once dominated her life was now tempered by a cautious optimism. She knew that the world was still harsh, that challenges would continue to arise. But she also knew that she was not powerless. The support she had received had given her the tools to navigate life more effectively, and she intended to use them to secure a better future for her brother and herself. Later that afternoon, the man arrived once more, carrying with him a bundle of educational materials and small supplies. He encouraged her to continue teaching her brother, to nurture his mind and body with the resources now available to them. He spoke with a calm authority, never commanding, always guiding. The girl listened intently, absorbing every word, every suggestion, feeling the weight of possibilities settle on her shoulders. For the first time, she felt that the choices she made could truly matter, that her efforts could shape her destiny. The young girl began to take on more responsibility, not just for her brother, but for herself. She organized their small home, created a routine for daily chores and lessons, and even found moments to write in her notebook, capturing her thoughts, dreams, and plans for the future. Each entry became a testament to her resilience, a record of her journey from desperation to determination. She wrote about her brother's laughter, about the warmth of food in their stomachs, and about the kindness of the man who had changed their lives so subtly yet profoundly. Her brother began to flourish as well. With proper nutrition and guidance, his health improved, and he became more active and playful. The girl watched him with growing pride, feeling the satisfaction that came from nurturing life and seeing it respond. She realized that her efforts, combined with the quiet support she had received, were creating real change. It was a small victory, but it mattered deeply, reinforcing her belief in the power of perseverance and compassion. One day, the man suggested they visit the town library, a place she had only ever glimpsed from a distance. She felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Libraries were foreign to her, vast and filled with knowledge that seemed unattainable. But with the man's gentle encouragement, she stepped inside, her brother clutching her hand tightly. They wandered among the shelves, touching books with reverence, and she felt an awakening within her. Here was a world of ideas, of stories, of possibilities beyond survival. She checked out a few simple books for her brother and herself, eager to learn, to explore, and to grow. Their evenings became times of study and shared stories. She read aloud to her brother, teaching him letters and numbers, while he responded with laughter and curiosity. The notebooks and pencils the man had given them became tools of growth, each page filled with lessons, reflections, and imaginative tales. The girl felt a pride she had never known, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond filling stomachs or surviving the day. She was shaping minds, including her own, and the transformation was profound. The man continued to visit, observing their progress quietly, offering guidance when needed, and providing supplies that made their lives more comfortable. He never imposed, never demanded gratitude, only offered gentle encouragement and support. The girl began to understand that true kindness was often quiet, consistent, and without expectation. It was a lesson she carried with her, applying it to how she treated her brother, how she approached her studies, and how she interacted with others in the village. One afternoon, as they worked together on a small garden in their courtyard, the man presented them with seeds and simple tools. He explained that growing their own vegetables could provide sustenance and a sense of independence. The girl and her brother eagerly began planting, learning the patience and care required to nurture life. Each sprout that emerged became a symbol of growth, resilience, and the tangible results of effort combined with guidance. The garden became a sanctuary, a place where hope could take root alongside the vegetables that would sustain them, as weeks turned into months. The young girl's confidence blossomed. She became more assertive in her interactions with the villagers, offering help, taking small jobs, and advocating for her brother when needed. People began to see her not just as a poor, desperate child, but as someone capable, determined, and resilient. Her reputation shifted slowly, the whispers of pity replaced by quiet admiration. She felt the subtle but powerful impact of her actions, reinforced by the ongoing support of the man who had introduced structure, guidance, and kindness into their lives. One evening, as the sun set and the village quieted, she sat with her brother under the soft glow of a lantern. They reflected on the changes they had experienced, the lessons they had learned, and the small victories that had accumulated over time. She realized that while the hardships had not disappeared, their ability to navigate them had grown immensely. The girl understood that life would always present challenges, but with determination, resilience, and the guidance of those who cared, they could overcome nearly anything. The man visited that night, observing them quietly as they worked on their studies and chores. He smiled at their progress, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. The girl met his gaze, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and respect. She did not need to express it in words. The connection, built on trust, support, and shared effort, was enough. She understood that true guidance did not come with demands or strings attached. It came from patience, consistency, and a genuine desire to see others grow. As they prepared for bed, the girl held her brother close, whispering promises of protection, education, and hope. She felt a growing confidence in her ability to provide for him, to nurture his growth, and to create a life that was better than the one they had inherited. The challenges remained, but the tools, lessons, and subtle guidance they had received were now firmly in place. She was no longer simply surviving. She was beginning to live, to shape a future, and to imagine possibilities that had once seemed impossible. And in that quiet, reflective night, she felt the strength to face tomorrow, knowing that each small step forward was a victory, and that her love, determination, and the kindness of others could change the course of their lives. The morning light spilled gently into the small home, illuminating the girl and her brother as they went about their simple routines. Their lives had changed remarkably over the past months, yet the girl still carried the weight of responsibility on her young shoulders. She had learned to manage their home, to care for her brother, and to embrace the hope that had been planted in their lives. The days of despair and fear were not entirely gone, but they were now tempered by resilience, determination, and the quiet kindness of the man who had entered their lives so unexpectedly. This morning, like many before, began with preparing breakfast from the vegetables they had grown and the bread they had carefully rationed. Her brother ate eagerly, his cheeks pink and eyes bright with energy, a far cry from the pale, weary child she remembered. She watched him with a sense of pride and relief, feeling the fruits of her hard work and dedication. The small improvements in their lives were tangible, yet they also carried a deeper significance, proof that perseverance, love, and guidance could bring meaningful change. As she washed the dishes and tidied the room, the man arrived quietly, as he often did, carrying a few simple items and a warm smile. Today, however, there was something different in his eyes, a sense of intention and care that went beyond his usual gestures. He spoke gently, asking how they were, how their studies were progressing, and how the garden was growing. The girl shared with him the successes of the past weeks, her words filled with cautious excitement. She described how her brother had learned to read simple words, how the vegetables were thriving, and how she had begun to feel capable of managing their daily struggles more effectively. The man nodded, listening intently, offering subtle guidance where needed. Then, for the first time, he spoke of possibilities beyond their immediate survival. He asked the girl what she dreamed of becoming, what she wished for herself and her brother in the future. At first, she hesitated, unsure if dreams were something she was allowed to have. But he encouraged her, gently insisting that her hopes and ambitions mattered. that she had the right to imagine a life beyond scarcity and struggle. Slowly, she began to open up, sharing thoughts she had buried deep within her heart, visions of education, of a secure home, of a life where her brother could grow safely and happily. The conversation filled her with a strange mix of excitement and fear. The world beyond her village seemed vast and unknown, yet for the first time, she felt that reaching for it was possible. The man's presence was no longer just about meeting immediate needs. It was about nurturing potential, helping her see that her life could be different if she allowed herself to believe in it. She felt a swelling of hope that made her heart pound, a feeling she had never experienced before. In the following days, the man continued to support them, helping them access resources, introducing opportunities for learning, and guiding them towards self-sufficiency. He did not take control, but he provided the tools and encouragement necessary for the girl to make her own choices. She became more confident in her decision-making, more capable of planning for the future, and more determined to protect and nurture her brother. The transformation in her mindset was as profound as the material improvements in their lives. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden planting a new batch of vegetables, the man presented them with a small box. Inside were notebooks, pencils, and a few simple educational games for her brother. He explained that learning could be fun, that knowledge was a key to freedom and opportunity. The girl's eyes lit up, and she felt a renewed determination to continue their education, to seize the chance that had been given to them. Her brother clapped his hands with delight, eager to explore the new tools and lessons. The garden became a place not just of growth for plants, but of growth for their minds and spirits. Evenings were filled with reading, writing, and planning for the days ahead. The girl discovered a deep joy in learning, in teaching her brother, and in envisioning a future where they could thrive. The man remained a quiet mentor, guiding without controlling, observing without judging. His kindness was steady, consistent, and transformative. The girl realized that true guidance did not demand acknowledgement. It simply empowered others to grow. Weeks turned into months, and the young girl's confidence continued to build. She began to interact more assertively with villagers, taking on tasks and responsibilities that she had once thought impossible. People noticed her determination, her resilience, and the care she showed for her brother. Slowly, she earned respect and recognition, not through wealth or status, but through her actions and character. The quiet influence of the man had equipped her with skills and confidence to navigate life with purpose. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, the man spoke to her with a gentle seriousness. He told her that he had been impressed by her growth, by her courage, and by the way she had embraced responsibility and opportunity. He said that it was time for her to truly envision a future beyond their current circumstances, to imagine paths and possibilities that could lead to lasting change. The girl listened, her heart pounding with excitement and anxiety. She realized that the support she had received was not a temporary fix, but a foundation upon which she could build a new life. The conversation sparked a series of plans and discussions. The man helped her identify opportunities for education, small projects that could generate income, and ways to ensure her brother's health and happiness. He taught her to think strategically, to plan ahead, and to take measured risks. The girl embraced these lessons with determination, realizing that her life was no longer defined solely by scarcity and struggle. She was learning to shape her own destiny. As days passed, the girl's growth became evident to everyone around her. She moved with confidence, spoke with clarity, and acted with purpose. Her brother thrived under her care, healthy, curious, and joyful. Their small home, once filled with despair and hunger, now echoed with laughter, learning, and the quiet hum of hope. The man's guidance had unlocked a potential she had not known existed, and she felt a deep gratitude that went beyond words. One morning, she took a moment to reflect, sitting outside with her brother in the garden. The plants they had nurtured were growing strong, the fruits of patience and care visible in every sprout and leaf. She thought about the journey they had traveled, from the fear, humiliation, and desperation of stealing bread, to the hope, growth, and opportunity that now defined their lives. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of transformation and possibility. She had learned that even in the darkest circumstances, kindness, perseverance, and determination could light a path to a better future. The man arrived quietly, observing them without intrusion. He smiled, acknowledging the strength and resilience they had cultivated. The girl met his gaze, understanding the silent message. They were capable. They were resilient, and they could continue to thrive on their own. Yet, she also understood the profound impact of his guidance, the quiet, steady presence that had allowed them to see beyond survival and embrace growth. It was a lesson she would carry with her always. As night fell, the girl tucked her brother into bed, whispering promises of protection, education, and hope. She looked around their small home, now filled with warmth and light, and allowed herself to imagine a future where they could continue to grow, learn, and thrive. The challenges of the past had not disappeared, but the tools, knowledge, and confidence they now possessed made them formidable. They were no longer merely surviving. They were living with purpose and vision. In that quiet night, the girl felt a profound sense of peace and determination. She knew that life would continue to present obstacles, but she was equipped to face them. Her love for her brother, her resilience, and the lessons she had learned from the man who had entered their lives gave her strength beyond measure. She whispered a final promise to herself and her brother: no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together with courage, hope, and determination. And as she closed her eyes, she felt the certainty that their journey had only just begun, that the future held endless possibilities shaped by love, perseverance, and the quiet power of human kindness.